I'm Jeff Cornwall, and this is the Entrepreneurial Mind. Today our guest is Lily Hansen. We'll be back to talk with her after this. Welcome, Lily.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So talk a little bit about this project you're doing, Word of Mouth. Kind of how did it start, and we'll talk about where it's going.
Sure. So I am from Chicago originally. I moved to Nashville almost 4 years ago. And, I always joke that this is a passion project that stemmed out of a lack of passion. And so when I moved here, I had several years under my belt of freelance writing work, specialized in arts criticism, music journalism, and had kind of gotten into doing interviews / profiles before I moved here. So when I moved to Nashville, I immediately hooked up with a lot of the local publications and very quickly realized that I had lost my voice, so to speak, as far as a writer goes.
Right.
So I just started collecting what has now become, a compilation of my interviews. And quickly on, I hooked up with 4 local photographers who became sort of my nuclear, family / creative hub here in Nashville.
Right.
And we went on what I joke were these sort of field trips. So we would go to different people's houses in town, all very successful artists, business people, chefs, entrepreneurial types who had sort of paved their own way. And I would interview them and they would photograph them. And so about 2 years into the project.
Now, is this still freelance work? Were you still selling these things to other media locally, or?
No, this was
project.
completely my own project. Yeah. So, I right away I coined the term word of mouth, and basically I just started collecting these interviews and photographs. And initially the goal was to create a book and self-publish it. But I would say about 6 months to a year into it, someone said to me, they had seen some of what I had done, and they said, what you're doing is really special. You could definitely get a publisher. And so I ended up hooking up with a local publishing house in town named Springhouse Press.
Sure.
And we put the book out last summer. So, it's kind of crazy because, I didn't really ever know what was going to happen with the entire thing. But since then, it's expanded into, I'm doing a live interview series with the Entrepreneurial Center in town. Vanderbilt, I'm working closely with them as well. And I've continued to put out my work on my own blog and am expanding into other formats.
So the work you're doing with the Entrepreneur Center in Vanderbilt, is that still part of the same brand and project, or?
It is. So I hooked up with them because, I live at a building called the Ryman Artist Lofts, which is the city's only residency dedicated solely to artists. So we're affiliated with an organization in town called the Arts and Business Council, and they had approached several people in my building, including myself, and said, the EC is doing a program called Periscope. This at the time was 2 years ago. They said it's the first of its kind. It's a 6-week course dedicated to teaching artists about business practices.
Right.
And so I jumped at it immediately because, I knew I had the art thing down, but I didn't know how to exactly monetize my talents. I didn't even know, how to keep track of my invoices or how to protect myself legally from not being paid. Just really basic stuff that no one had ever taught me. And so I started taking that class, and once I graduated from it, they kind of made it clear that if I ever wanted to partner with them on something, the door was open. So I approached them last summer and said, wouldn't it be cool if we did a year-long program together where I did these live interviews, and featured people that I'd already interviewed for my book. And now people have read the text and they got to know them in one way. They get to see them in real life now, and sort of my, dynamic relationship with all of them. So that's what we're doing all year.
Very cool. So are you done freelancing, or do you still kind of do some freelancing work to help support some of this, or how are you doing that transition?
Yeah, so I still do freelance writing. A lot of, weirdly enough, what I've transitioned into is I do a lot of ghostwriting. I help with people with their book proposals, and I've sort of developed this interesting niche of writing, which I was explaining to someone the other day, and they said, "Oh, you're kind of like a therapist," because a lot of people, and it's all they find out about it through word of mouth because it's
Sure.
kind of unconventional. But I've had a decent amount of people hire me who they feel like they have a story inside of them and they want to get it out, and they call me the vessel. So like they sit there and they talk to me like this for an hour, 2 hours at a time, and I go and transcribe the interviews and then give it to them, and they do whatever they want with it. So that's one way that I make my living, and then sort of odd jobs here and there. But it's tough. I mean, I always tell people, if you want to make a living in any sort of artistic discipline, you better really love it, because it ain't easy. You have to
Right.
constantly be reinventing yourself and thinking of new ways to get your brand out there.
So do you see a point where word of mouth is going to be something that you can put your sole focus on? Can you see that on the horizon out there, or?
I can, because there was so much interest just from that book, and I think, like I was explaining to you earlier, what I do, the content is so easily repurposable that I can, I take my interviews and I can create a book from it. I can create a blog post, a podcast.
Right.
If I had a camera there, we could create YouTube content. So there's so many different avenues to go around. I think really the big thing is, and this is something that I've had to kind of wrap my head around a lot recently, is just establishing myself in a very overcrowded market,
Sure.
and what it is that makes what I'm doing so interesting. And it's something that I've had to actually ask a lot of other people about, that because when you're so in the middle of something, it's hard to see.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. So as you know, I mean, you can have a great product, but it all comes down to marketing it.
Right. Well, what a great story. I would love to have you back sometime soon and hear about the progress in your journey.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for coming by today.